So today we are going to study diagnosis of genetic and infectious diseases. First of all, you should know that what are genetic diseases. Genetic diseases are caused by abnormality in individual's genome. Okay, if genetic makeup or there is some mutation, aberrations, or some alteration in individual's genome that can affect any uh, critical or important function, then that will result in a genetic disease, and that will be inheritable in nature. So that will be inherited from one generation to another generation. So these are the diseases resulting from the abnormality of an individual's genome are called the genetic diseases. Now, diagnosis of genetic diseases is critical, right? And that too, differential diagnosis of genetic disorders is very important, because we must be, must be able to differentiate a genetic disorder and a non-genetic disorder. Okay, that is arising due to another other than non-genetic reason. Okay, we can see the onset of appearance of the physical features related to any genetic disease in the early stage of the life or childhood of an individual, or even in later stages of life. Sometimes genetic diseases start, their symptoms starts appearing in very from the start of the individual's life. Ju- okay, and sometimes after attaining the puberty, or after giving birth to the baby. Okay, then these the onset of the appearance of physical features starts. So there can be any stage, either early stage or the late stage of the life, when individual these physical features related to a genetic disease can appear in an individual. Okay, all the diseases have a genetic component, right? Either they are genetic or non-genetic, but they have a genetic component. Okay, but the extent to which the genes contributing to the disease varies. Okay, sometimes their contribution is too much that only altering that gene sequence will alleviate the symptoms. There are n number of diseases which are associated with the abnormality in one or the other chromosome. Like in this figure, we can see that there are n number of diseases for which even DNA tests are also available. These red dots are showing you the diseases, genetic diseases for which the DNA tests are currently available. So we see, if we start from the chromosome 1, we will take a single example for each chromosome associated disease. Like say for example, if with the chromosome 1, Gaucher disease, in abnormality or some aberration leads to Gaucher disease, which is a chronic enzyme deficiency occurring frequently. Okay, occurring frequently among the Ashkenazi Jews. Okay, this is a population which are of people who in whom we see many genetic disorders. Okay, then in with the chromosome 2, we have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a syndrome of or disease of connective tissue. Then with 3, we have retinitis pigmentosa, which is a progressive degeneration of the retina. And then with the chromosome number 4, Huntington's disease is related, which is a lethal late onset nerve degenerative disease. Okay, late onset. And then with fifth chromosome, familial adenomatous polyposis is related, which is where intestinal polyps develop leading to colon cancer. And then we have hemochromatosis and spinocerebellar ataxia. In hemochromatosis, we have abnormal high absorption of iron in the diet. Okay, from the diet, abnormally high iron is absorbed. And then spinocerebellar ataxia is, in this disease, nerves are destroyed in the brain and spinal cord, resulting in loss of muscle control. Then cystic fibrosis, we all know that mucus production increases in the lungs, interfering with the breathing. And then Werner syndrome, that is premature aging. Then melanoma, which is tumor originating in the skin. multiple endocrine neoplasia type 2, okay, where tumors in endocrine glands and other tissues occur. Sickle cell anemia, you all know, are very familiar with, which is a chronic inherited anemia in which red blood cells sickles and clogs the arterioles and capillaries. And then phenylketonuria, which is a metabolic genetic disorder and inborn error in metabolism occur. If untreated, if it remains untreated, it may result in the mental retardation also. And then retinoblastoma is related to chromosome 13, that is a childhood tumor of the eye. Okay, Alzheimer disease is a degenerative brain disorder marked by premature senility. Okay, here it is also a genetic disorder. Tay-Sachs disease, we all know that it is a fatal hereditary disorder involving lipid metabolism. Okay, and polycystic kidney disease results in formation of cysts in that enlarges kidneys and results in renal failure. Breast cancer, 5% of all the cases breast cancers are also regulated by genetic factors. Then there is neurofibromatosis type 1, where benign tumors in the nerve tissue below the skin occurs. Okay, and then amyloidosis is there. This is also a genetic disorder where accumulation of insoluble fibrillar protein occurs in the tissues. Okay, so fibrillar protein starts accumulating in tissues. Then myotonic dystrophy, where in adults muscular dystrophy starts. Then familial hypercholesterolemia is also having its genes linked to the chromosome 19, that results in extremely high cholesterol in the individual. ADA immune deficiency, we did a study about it, where it was the first hereditary condition for which gene therapy was devised. And then there is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, late onset lethal degenerative nerve disease. Okay, so this is related with the abnormality in the chromosome 21. And then we have glucose galactose, it's a malabsorption syndrome. Okay, it is potentially a fatal digestive disorder. Then we have hemophilia A, that is related to chromosome X. It results in clotting deficiency, again another disorders related to some chromosome S. X are muscular dystrophy and adrenalo adrenoleukodystrophy. Okay, that is again a fatal nerve disease. Okay, so now you are aware that there are many diseases occurs in human and other organisms also, that are controlled by some or the other genetic factor, inheritable genetic factor. Either they are associated with XY chromosome, XY chromosome, or other sex chromosome or autosomes. Okay, now in what conditions we use genetic tests for diagnosis of these genetic disorders? We can do it at many levels. We can do newborn screening, right, uh, to prevent the onset of symptoms and minimize the disease severity in newborns. Okay, as early we diagnose the genetic disease, as early more early we can start the treatment. So to prevent the onset of symptoms and minimize the disease severity, we can do genetic tests for in newborns to screen whether they are having some genetic disorder or not. And then we can do carrier testing to help couples to learn if they carry any disease causing gene or any mutated gene that they can pass to their children. Okay, and the risk of passing to their children a recessive allele for a genetic disease can be minimized if by prior knowledge of the if they are carrying a gene. Okay, and then we can do prenatal diagnosis to detect the changes in the fetus's gene or chromosome, whether the fetus is carrying certain disease causing gene or not, or any malformed chromosome, or any mal that any gene or portion of the genome that can cause a genetic disorder. And then we can carry out the diagnostic or prognostic genetic test to confirm a diagnosis in a symptomatic individual. If an individual is already showing the symptoms of some disease and we have a doubt that it might be a genetic disorder, then we can do carry out the genetic test, and also to monitor prognosis of a disease or response to a treatment, how the individual is responding, whether the disease is under getting under control after its response. Then in that situation we can carry out diagnostic or prognostic genetic testing. And then fifth one is the predictive or predispositional genetic tests. Okay, in this case we do it to identify individuals at risk of getting a disease prior to the onset of symptoms. Okay, so what do we do here? We identify those individuals which are at risk of getting the disease prior to the onset of the symptoms. So far individual is healthy, and we just want to check whether there is a predisposition of him or her of starting the symptoms of a genetic disorder that he has. Okay, he or she has. Then pharmacogenetics purposes, for those also we can carry out genetic test. If we have a particular health condition, or any person having a particular health condition or disease, and so in that case this type of testing can be done to determine which medication, which dose, how much will be most effective and beneficial for that person. Okay, so pharmacogenetics. Okay, and for that also we carry out genetic testing. And then pre-implantation testing. So when while while implanting embryos into the womb, the embryos can be tested for any genetic abnormality before implantation. Okay, so as to prevent the formation of any uh, fetus that is carrying a gene for potentially a genetic disorder. There are different types of genetic testing. There are basically three types: cytogenetic testing, biochemical testing, and molecular testing. Here in genetic testing, our aim is to identify the reason of the disease, right? Whether it is genetic or non-genetic. So we employ cytogenetic testing, biochemical testing, or molecular testing for this purpose. Okay, cytogenetic testing, we have either conventional cytogenetic techniques or molecular cytogenetic techniques. In conventional ways, mostly karyotyping is used, and we do it by different bending, by visualizing different types of bendings using different bending techniques of the chromosomes. And in molecular cytogenetics we used fish or multicolor fish or locus specific fish like technique to identify uh, the specific locus, whether it is you know uh, is as per the healthy, or it is having the proper gene or the mutated gene, or some other kind of problem is there. So we can identify using fluorescence in situ hybridization for that purpose. In biochemical testing, we usually test presence of abnormal levels of biomolecules or malformed biomolecules. Okay, biochemical testing, say we can, if some protein is malformed, then we can identify by biochemical testing. If some enzyme is non-functional, or or the some kind of modification is there in the enzymatic activity, then also we can carry out the biochemical testing. In molecular techniques, we analyze DNA, RNA, and proteins directly, either by using polymerase chain reaction, by reverse transcripted PCR, or quantitative real-time PCR, or by carrying out comparative genomic hybridization, next generation sequencing, and microarray analysis. So these are the molecular techniques that can be used for genetic testing. Okay, so first of all, we will take a look at all the cytogenetic testings that can be used for diagnosis of genetic. Cytogenetic testing basically involve examination of whole chromosomes for presence of any abnormality. Okay, so in this technique we examine the whole chromosome by seeing the bending pattern on the chromosome, right? So what do we do in cytogenetic testing through chromosome analysis is that we uh, observe the observe the chromosome under microscope. Okay, and the chromosome that we use are should be in metaphase of the cell cycle, because at this stage they are more condensed and the bending will be more peculiar or obvious at this stage. So we observe the changes like trisomies, monosomies, deletions or additions, or balanced or unbalanced translocations, right? All these aberrations probably you have studied already, that we have aneuploidy or we have euploidies leading to the genetic disorders, right? Like for example, in trisomy we have the 20 chromosome number 21. There we have an extra copy of chromosome number 21 leading to the Down syndrome. In monosomies we have one, for example, in Turner syndrome we have uh, one sex chromosome missing, so the genotype is 45 and X. And then we have deletions where complete breakage of a chromosome a segment resulting in partial monosomy, or chromosome material from two or more chromosomes that has completely broken off. They can reunite to another chromosome and cause partial monosomies, trisomies, resulting in congenital syndromes, miscarriages, or infertility. Okay, so changes in the number or intactness of the chromosome can be observed through these cytogenetic examinations. In some cases, the abnormality exists only in a subset of cells, like all of the body cells probably are not carrying that mutation or are not carrying that abnormality. Only a subset of the population is having that abnormality. So in that case, when we have a mosaic background, increased number of the cells in the metaphase are required to be examined. Okay, so that now we can easily determine the percentage of the cell representing the abnormality. How many cell, or what is the percentage of the cells that are having that abnormality? Okay, so in that case, higher number of cells must be tested. Now, sometimes even highest bending pattern resolution cannot detect submicroscopic changes. Sometimes we cannot detect high resolution. We don't have as much resolution to detect the submicroscopic changes. In that case, we may require fish or molecular methods to study that particular abnormality. Okay, so like in D. Gorgie syndrome, Prader-Willi syndrome, Angelman syndrome, we do use fluorescent in situ hybridization to detect the abnormality. In this figure, you are seeing that the chromosome number 21, uh, we have an extra copy of the chromosome 21 leading to the Down syndrome. So this is an example of aneuploidy, where which is an abnormal condition where one or more chromosome of a normal set of the chromosomes are missing or present in the extra copy. So here in case of Down syndrome, we have an extra copy of chromosome number 21. You can see this karyotype, right? I just used a term karyotype and showed you a karyotype. So what is a karyotype? Karyotype is a complete chromosomal set of the nucleus of the cell. Okay, chromosomal set as it is isolated and viewed under the microscope. The karyotype is the complete chromosomal set of the nucleus of a cell. So when we observe the chromosome under microscope, when we take their pictures, then we arrange them in their decreasing order of the size as such. Okay, so that diagram that will be called a karyotype. And when we diagrammatically present the karyotype with all of the pairs of the chromosome arranged in order of size, is called an ideogram. Okay, in ideogram it will be simply a diagrammatic presentation, not the actual image clicked in the microscope, through the microscope, right? So there are sometimes people use these terms interchangeably, but there are subtle differences in the karyotype and the ideogram. Okay, so we can imagine that every organism has a standard karyotype, like Homo sapien have a standard karyotype which provides a reference or frame of a reference for analysis of mutations. So we can compare two karyotypes, and using one as a reference we can tell whether the another karyotype is having certain changes or not, like aberrations are there, abnormalities are there or not. Okay, within a karyogram chromosomes are aligned along a horizontal axis. Okay, like here, if we I will just show you one image, just a second. In this image you can see a karyotype where chromosomes are arranged as per their, as they are clicked in the uh, microscope, right? So here the chromosomes are present as they were clicked in the under the microscope. Okay, in this diagram the chromosomes are also arranged as per their size, although there you see sometimes they are bended, they are not stretched, right? They are not stretched longitudinally, but they are arranged as per their size. So in a karyotype the chromosomes are arranged as per their size, all the autosomes first followed by the sex chromosomes. Okay, and their centromeres are aligned onto a horizontal axis. Okay, all the centromeres are aligned on a line. Okay, and their petite arm, that is the p arm, short arm, is always facing upwards, and their longer arms always face the downwards in a karyotype. So, within a karyogram, chromosomes are aligned along a horizontal axis shared by their centromeres. Okay, individual chromosomes are always depicted with their short arm, that is P arm. P stands for petite, which is a French word for small. So the petite arm always depicted towards the top, and their long Q arms are always at the bottom. Okay, centromeres placement can also be used to identify the gross morphology, shape, and chromosomes. So once we have placed the centromere along the axis, and now we can clearly see the morphology, shape, and other features of different chromosomes, and then we can compare the reference and the sample of the patient. Okay, the two karyotypes can be compared to identify any abnormality or any changes. Now chromosome bears visible traits that can be used to study speciation. Okay, this is different than the for the diagnosis of genetic disorders, but if we want to study speciation, then also we can the chromosomes bear visible traits to show us that how the two karyotypes are differing between two species. We will study different types of chromosome bandings that can be used for diagnosis of different genetic changes, right? There are different types of banding pattern can be used, like Q banding, G banding, R banding, NOR banding, C banding. There are different types of banding techniques present to visualize and to see the changes and to compare the changes between chromosomes. Okay, Q banding. In this type of banding, we use quinarcin mustard, which is an alkylating agent. Okay, it stains the chromosome in such a way that it gives you a banding pattern. Bright and light bands appear on the chromosome. Like in this picture, you can see that some regions of the chromosomes are dark while others are light, right? So AT rich region gives you bright bands, while GC rich regions give you lighter bands under the fluorescence microscope. So this image was clicked under the fluorescence microscope. So in different kinds of banding, you either use fluorescence microscopy or bright field microscopy to observe the banding pattern. In case of G banding, the chromosomes always are stained with Giemsa stain. Okay, in all the banding, staining, we always use metaphasic chromosomes. Okay, we arrest the cells in the metaphase and then we isolate the chromosomes to stain. Okay, in Giemsa banding, these chromosomes are pre-treated with trypsin to hydrolyze the proteins, associated proteins, and then we partially hydrolyze the with the trypsin, and then we do the staining. R banding is in a way reverse of G banding, because the bands that are stained lighter in the G banding will be will be stained darker in the R banding, and vice versa. Okay, so this R banding is helpful in analyzing structures of basically chromosome ends, which are usually stained very light in the gene cell or G banding. Okay, so we usually use it for studying the differences in the ends of the chromosomes. Okay, in C banding, which is constitutive heterochromatin or centromere banding, okay, here the areas stained darker are the heterochromatin. Okay, this technique involves acid treatment of the metaphasic chromosomes, followed by incubation in alkali, and then staining by Giemsa. So here also we are using Giemsa stain only, which will be staining the centromeres very darkly. So we can study the heterochromatin in this kind of staining. Another type of staining is NOR staining. NOR staining is an abbreviation of for nuclear organizing region, NOR. Okay. Here we use silver staining method to differentiate or to identify genes for ribosomal RNA that were active in the previous cell cycle. You see here only few chromosomes are showing those dark bands, uh, at the mostly at the petite arms, small arms, they are having these nuclear organizing regions. So to identify these regions which were actively making the ribosomal RNA can be identified by the NOR staining. Here, Giemsa staining, Q banding, R banding, and C banding. You can clearly see that the in Giemsa banding and the R banding, the regions which are stained darker in the this G banding are stained lighter in this R banding. So the regions that cannot be studied here, like the ends of the chromosomes, can be studied by the R banding very clearly. And in the C banding, you can study centromeric region that is rich in heterochromatin, right? So this way, these banding patterns are very helpful for identification of any abnormality or any malformation of the chromosomal regions, or some different kinds of aneuploidies. This table gives you a summary of different banding types. Other than Q, G, R, C, and NOR banding, there are replication banding and DA-DAPI staining methods also. And in these banding types, we either use as we already studied that in Q banding we use quinarsin, in G banding, R banding, C banding we use this Giemsa. Okay, and in R banding we use again Giemsa. In replication banding we use Hoechst and Giemsa. Either of these can be used. Whenever we use Hoechst, we use fluorescence based microscopy, and NOR banding, as it is a silver staining, AgNO3 is used, and bright field microscopy is used. Okay, so this table summarizes that what are the uses and advantages. Mostly these are very simple staining procedures, very easy to for photography. It can identify all the chromosomes, right? All these techniques can be used to identify the all the chromosomes, right? And some techniques are specific for studying certain chromosomes, like Q banding reveals the polymorphism on the chromosome 3, 4, 13, 14, 15, 21, 22, and Y, right? And in case of this replication banding, it's replicating X chromosome can be studied, right? Likewise, in case of NOR bending, we know that it reveals polymorphism and rearrangement of the, in addition to NOR regions, it reveals polymorphism in the acrocentric chromosomes also. You know that there are different kinds of chromosomes, you know, metacentric, submetacentric, acrocentric, and others. So Knoll bending reveals polymorphism and rearrangement in acrocentric chromosomes. So this way, these all these techniques have their uses and advantages. This figure show you a general scheme of how to isolate cells for chromosome staining of the chromosome in the metaphase, right? You can use blood cells to do that. So we isolate usually some 10 to 20 ml of the blood, and then we can just use a few drops of the blood to cultivate the cells to stimulate the mitosis, and we incubate the cells at 37 degrees Celsius for 2 or 3 days. Okay, while cultivation we add phytohemoglobin to stimulate the mitosis. Right now, once the cells are propagating actively, undergoing active mitosis, we can stop the cell division at the metaphase by adding cell cycle inhibitors like colcimid. Okay, so we add colcimid to culture for 1 to 2 hours to stop the mitosis in metaphase, right? And then we transfer these cells to tubes and we centrifuge to concentrate the cells, and we remove all the liquid. And we now add, once we have concentrated the cells, we add low salt solution to eliminate the red blood cells. In the low salt solution, the red blood cells will burst open, and also the lymphocytes will swell open. Now the what we'll do, we will drop the cells into onto the microscopic slide, and then we'll stain with the GIMSA. Actually, during the low salt solution, the red blood cells will swell, burst open, while lymphocytes will swell. Okay, now once we stain the cells with the GIMSA, we can examine it under the microscope to see the bending pattern of the chromosomes. Okay, and then we can process the image, take the image, make the karyotype via arranging the chromosomes in decreasing order of their size and arranging their centromeres at the horizontal axis. Here are some examples where karyotype analysis has been used to detect any aneuploidy or any malformation in the chromosomes. Okay, here you see Alzheimer's disease, Down syndrome, ataxia, and telangiectasia, right? Different kinds of glioma, glioblastoma, and schizophrenia, where different chromosomes are affected, or different malformations are there in different chromosomes are identified, or these malformations are identified by either karyotype analysis or by karyotyping and fish together, and G banding, Q banding. Okay, so these kinds of banding methods are very useful for detection of any malformation or any abnormality at the chromosomal level. Nowadays, we can isolate single individual chromosomes through using flow cytometry also. What we need to do is to stain the chromosomes with different strains like chromomycin and Hox stains, and by using this we can separate the larger chromosomes from the smaller ones, because the larger one will contain more DNA and they will yield a greater fluorescence signals. So depending on that, we can sort the larger chromosome from the smaller chromosomes. Okay, and we can plot the chromosomes. We can plot a dot plot depending on their base pair composition as well as their size, and they always will fall onto a particular unique places. By using this simple strategy, it is possible to separate all the chromosomes, all the human chromosomes, except the chromosome number 9 to 12 and 14, 15, because these chromosomes are very smaller in size, and their base composition is almost similar for high resolution separation. So other than that, we can separate all the chromosomes, and this Chromosome separation using flow cytometry has been pivotal in the success of Human Genome Project, because we could separate the chromosomes, as individuals, and we could then sequence them and give the detailed sequence of the particular chromosome. So by separating the chromosomes, we can compare the individual chromosomes in a healthy and a diseased one, and we can tell whether any genetic abnormality is responsible for the in the particular chromosome for the diseased. Okay. We can of course use biochemical methods for diagnosing genetic diseases, because uh, some metabolic errors are caused by the inborn errors. Okay, because they are caused by the genetic factors. Okay, if protein is malfunctioning, mm, you know that most of the proteins, all the proteins are encoded by the genes, and genes are residing on the chromosomes. So any abnormality that leads to any mutation or any error in the that message translation, then it will cause the disease, right? So several classes of proteins exist in to fulfill multiple functions. Some are enzymes, some are transporters, some are structural proteins, some are regulatory ones, some are receptors, while some are hormones. So any aberration or any malfunction will destroy the homeostasis and may result in the disease manifestation, right? So a mutation in any type of protein may be deleterious if the mutation affects the functionality of the protein, right? So different types of changes can occur either in the protein concentrations, like if some protein is not made at all, or too little protein is made, or even sometimes more protein than required is produced. A protein is made in proper concentration, but it is misfolded, it is not functional, or its active site is modified, or other critical region is altered. So, or it is folded misfolded, or it gets localized into some other region where it is not required, or it is it keeps assembling incorrectly. So all these reasons can result in the disorder, right? So if we can test the levels of the protein, or if we can test the levels of the RNA making the protein, then we can tell whether there is some problem with the uh, expression of the protein or the gene responsible for making that protein. So this way we can detect the genetic disorders also. So in indirect fashion, we can detect the genetic diseases by biochemical test on proteins and level of metabolites and quantity of proteins. Usually, we take uh, uh, samples like blood, urine, amniotic fluid, cerebrospinal fluid, where proteins are present, and then we can test the levels, activity, and structural properties of the protein isolated from these samples. Okay, and because these proteins are very thermolabile, or we can say they degrade very quickly as compared to the DNA, we should store our sample always very properly with utmost care. Okay, so that until it reaches the lab, it is safe and safe to be tested. So I'll stop here in this lecture, and we'll meet in our next video with more methods, basically molecular methods for diagnosis of genetic diseases, as well as different diagnostic methods for infectious diseases. Thank you, viewers, for watching this video. Please do subscribe, like, and share this video, and keep coming on my channel. Thank you.